All right, so the topic we're going to cover now is a topic about specifically targeted to looking at how we might do a a semi-automated import of a journal entry into SAP Business One. So why would you use this? Certainly, doing journal entries isn't something that's overly cumbersome normally, but a good use case for this might be if you're doing a payroll journal entry and there's many lines and you just rather not type that manually. We can sort of show you a way that you can develop a template so that when you get an output from another system, like say a payroll system, that data can be fitted into the template, and there's a bit more of a semi-automated sort of easy function to get that type of data into the system. Okay. So again, we'll roll over to our trusty demo system. All right, so here we've got Business One. I'm running Business One running on SAP HANA, so that's why the dashboard looks the way that it does. And you can see that I've got one of these workbenches up. Just so that everybody knows, this workbench was originally designed for the HANA Fiore system, but this workbench process map, which is essentially a visual representation of what's in the menus over off to the side here, this is also available in the Boyum B1 usability package as part of their dashboard package. So whether you're a SQL customer or a HANA customer, you can have this little financial process. So these are sort of nice because they give you a little more of a, I don't have to hunt for the stuff in the menus that I'm after. I've got it's kind of a visual way to find things. And the icons, if I click on the icon, let's say I'm right into the journal entry, the workbench also has this pull-out feature that sort of says, well, there's things associated with the journal entry that I want to tag on there, and if I click on it and then click on the feature, it calls the specific functionality. The financial reports are sort of available through here as well. So like I say, not just a HANA feature, you can have it for SQL as well, as long as you're running B1 usability package. So I'm going to click on the journal entry. Now, notice that, and this was a feature I think brought in around version 9.2 or 9.3, this import from Excel. There's always been ways, of course, to import data to the system from Excel. The main way that our consulting team does the majority of data migration during a new implementation is, a tool called the Data Transfer Workbench, but the DTW is really just appropriate in situations where some of these other import tools don't fit, but it's a consulting level tool because it's more comprehensive to all of the tables in the system, all of the data objects, so it's much more robust than the tool that I'm about to show you, the DTW. That is. That being said, the DTW requires a lot of knowledge in order to use effectively, so there's a bit of a trade-off there. So what Business One has been providing for a little while now is a data import-export tool from Excel, and I can find that the general instance of that import-export tool by going to Administration and Data Import-Export, Data import from Excel, and you can see that there are a few options here. And originally this import from Excel tool only included the ability to import base, business partner, and item master record data. It was later expanded to cover price lists. You can see that you can use it to import business partner catalog numbers, so the SKU numbers or the serial numbers that your vendors or your customers have for the things that you've got your own SKU numbers for, that's business partner catalog numbers. And then you'll also notice that now you're able to do journal entry. And the idea behind this tool is that it allows you to map what's in an Excel sheet, and the fields, like let's say if we were looking to map an Excel sheet that had business partner information, I could map the columns of the Excel sheet to the fields in the business partner master record. I could develop an Excel template, I could save this mapping, and then whenever I wanted to do a mass import of business partners, I could do so. So recently, they've expanded this to also do it on the journal entry, and presumably the best use of this is, in a case where you've got a massive journal entry and it's just sort of a pain in the neck to have to do that one by one. So here we've got a journal entry. Now, there was a trick that somebody wanted me to show. When you're doing a manual journal entry, here's the header information, the header being sort of that, the primary document number, the primary posting date, due date, doc date of the overall journal entry. And then down below, of course, there's the lines or the rows, which are the sort of the individual transaction lines, account by account, debit versus credit, journal entry, right? But I'm putting my cursor in the GL account /BP code field. And here's a trick. If I press tab when my cursor's in the field, what I get is I get a list of GL accounts. And then I can pick a GL account against which to post a credit or a debit or what have you. If I actually hit Control tab, what I get is a list of business partners. So each one of these lines below, the reason it says either GL account or business partner is because the transaction line, the journal entry line, could be either against a journal ledger account code, or it can be against the business partner subledger code. And the way that I get a list of business partners when I have my cursors in this field, instead of clicking tab to get the list of GL accounts, I hit Control tab and I get a list of business partners. So if I wanted to put this first line against a business partner, I just select the business partner and then away I go. So it's impacting the business partner subledger. Now, if you had any more detailed questions about exactly what that was doing, I'd probably take that and get one of the consulting leads to answer that for you. Okay. All right. So just so that you know, that's how you access the business partner subledger when in a journal entry. So let's go ahead and let's suppose that what we're really wanting to do, I'm just going to back up a couple of records in sequence, and I'm going to make light of one of the journal entries here. I believe it's this one. I've got journal entry number 887. And this was just done through automated GL account determination posting. But what I'd like to do is I'd like to try to use this Excel tool to approximate this journal entry, like to create the same thing, essentially. So what we've done is we'll go to add a new journal entry and we'll hit import from Excel, and it calls up this Excel tool. And you can take a look at the mapping, and everything from column A to column M is already predetermined by SAP. They're like, we predetermined that those fields should be mapped column A through column M. So you can't modify those. But what I did was I added columns N, O, P, Q, R, and I selected the things in the journal entry that I wanted to map to. So the account code, BP code, was one of these options, and I mapped it to column M, and so on. So, I would assume that you want to, make sure that if you're creating a journal entry, you're putting it against an account, and then of course you're putting a debit and a credit balance as well. Now those are the columns that they'd map to, and then what we need is we need an Excel sheet where the columns approximate that. Now normally you would not include the header in your Excel sheet. I've done that just to kind of make it clear, these are the columns that you would use for record type. So every one of these manual journal entry templates need to have one row that indicates the data for the header that's going to go into the journal entry here, and then as many rows for lines, so as many lines as you have in the journal entry marked with an L. So if I look at the actual journal entry that I've queued up in my sample, so I got rid of the header because when I actually try to upload this as a tab delimited text file, that's the format this needs to be in. So there's a little bit of doing to figure out your sequence here. But I created my Excel sheet. I've got my header row, and I've indicated the numbering sequence it's in and the date, the posting date, due date, document date that it's in. The rest of these entries are line entries, and you can see that the account codes and the balances are meant to match that sample journal entry that I just showed you, the journal entry 887. Also, the first line of the journal entry was against a business partner code, so that this column, it has to say BP in order to pick the business partner subledger, and the the remaining 4 lines were general ledger account codes. So that business partner code is here. Those general ledger account codes are here. So that's something that we can help walk you through, the development of this template and the procedure for saving this in the right format for upload. Because if you don't follow the procedure closely, it crashes SAP and you get frustrated like I did last night when I was testing it. We've worked that all out for you. So the best thing to do if you want to do this with your payroll entries or whatever is come to one of our, submit a support ticket. We'll probably assign a consulting to this. It's it's not a very lengthy exercise. And then we'll say, okay, here's what your template needs to look like. Here's what your procedure is. Once you've filled in the template, save it as this file. And then you're in a position to turn around and do this, which is we click the import from Excel button. We choose the mapping template. So the way that these are mapped can be different. You can have more than one mapping template. So, I've got a payroll entry mapping. I've got one for just a general journal entry, so I'm going to choose that one. Then I'm going to go browse to the tab delimited text file that I created for this example. It's right here. So it's based on that Excel grid that I just showed you. And I'm going to say that. And then if this has all been done correctly, import should just bring it into the journal entry. So voila, there you go. There's the proof that it works. It created the same journal entry that you had seen just a moment ago. That was number 887. Now, this is probably not the true use case for this. So I'm just going to hit, I'm just going to cancel that. Let's say where this is really useful to us is importing a payroll journal entry, and you've got 87 employees. So each one of these, journal entry lines, they might be going against the same account, but we want a transaction line, one journal entry line or row that indicates the payroll amount of a specific person. We may even, link in the remarks field who that person is, or an employee number, or who's being paid, just so that some of that data is inside of Business One. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll just sort of show you the mock-up of what I got for that payroll entry. So I'll hit import from Excel. I'm going to pick my mapping template. That's for payroll entry. It's basically the same one. And I'm going to find the payroll file that I created. It's right here. Again, it's a tab delimited text file, which was produced from Excel. I'm going to click OK, and then I'm going to hit import. And then, and then we're going to wait. So it's going to, it's an 87-line journal entry that, adds in about a little under 40 seconds here, or what have you, or 30 seconds here. But it's probably more convenient than having to create this journal entry by hand. So if you've got this Excel template for, lengthy journal entries that you're used to doing, and the procedure's good and clean, it can be a nice way to sort of take a procedure that might take, half an hour, who knows, sometimes when you're getting interrupted by people, it takes longer than that, into, a 5-10 minute process. So you can see there, we've got 87 lines of payroll entries. Again, a pretty simple entry. I just sort of did the same line just 87 times, but you can see the potential benefit here. And you may have other, fairly lengthy manual journal entry transactions that you'd like to automate in this way, so they can be set up. Okay. All right, so that is the journal entry import utility tool. And perhaps what we'll do at this time is open it up to questions. So Tammy, I don't see any questions so far.
Yeah, I don't see any either. Oh, maybe there is one here.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a couple coming in, so.
Okay.
Did you just want me to start with the first one there, and you can address that?
Right, sure.
So the first question is, we pay expenses through our payroll system, which differ every month.
Yes, and how could we
Yeah, how can we
potentially
deal with
handle
this?
that?
Yeah, and yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a really good question, and it's possible that the answer to that question is, um, um, you know, there's probably different ways that you can do it. I mean, you could argue that the expenses get tracked inside of SAP, but you still want to use the payroll system to actually complete the payment to the individual, like process the EFT transaction for, or the electronic transaction for the base payroll amount plus the expense amount. I think that's probably similar to the way we're doing it, Tammy. Like we're actually using Business One to track the expenses inside, and then the amount of the reimbursement then gets pushed into payroll and not the other way around, if that makes sense. But in theory, it would be possible, like if you're handling the tracking of expenses inside the payroll software, and those expenses essentially were in expense categories that matched GL accounts, there's no reason that we couldn't use the, what we just showed you to help automate that transfer of data from here to here. The question just sort of becomes is, how sophisticated is that expense management process on the payroll end? What do you have to track? Sometimes people just capture the expenses, the expense categories, and they'll set their employees up as essentially business partners, like a vendor business partners, and they'll generate what amounts to like an AP invoice to pay expenses, and then that stuff goes to payroll. But it could work the other way around. I hope that helps. I mean, the answer is essentially that we'd want to look at what you're doing, and we'd want to look to see what makes the most sense. Does it make most sense to manage expenses over here or over here? And certainly we could provide some level of automation so that there's not a ton of manual entry between the two systems. Okay. So I see there's another question here. The first question, you can let me know if that sort of satisfies your answer. We're always willing to kind of take those answers offline if you're wanting to know more. The other question is, can you import a voucher instead of a journal entry? And that's a fantastic question, because I actually looked at that when I was setting up the webinar. You don't have the same import ability with a journal voucher as you do with a journal entry. Like if you look at the screen for journal vouchers, you'll notice that there is no like import into journal voucher sort of a screen. And then when you go from the journal voucher sort of summary screen down into the actual journal voucher itself, notice how there is no import button here. Now, that being said, there's something that I didn't tell you about. So beyond this import utility, these grids actually do support copy and paste. So what do I mean by that? So let's say you wanted to do this in journal voucher instead of journal entry. And let's just see if there are any journal vouchers here in the system. It looks like we might have one. Oh, it says journal voucher number 2. That it could be debatable whether there's an actual journal entry, but let's just quickly create a voucher, give you a sense of what we're talking about here. So I'll just make a nonsense entry. Okay, unbalanced, of course, it's complaining with me. But where I'm going with this is the contents of this journal voucher could come from an Excel-based template. And I'm just going to dump it to Excel right now to show you what I'm talking about. If the columns in an Excel file match, like let's say these columns here that are an Excel file, you've got an Excel template for journal vouchers instead of journal entries. If I copy from an Excel clipboard and paste it into a grid like this in Business One, you see how that's actually supported, right? So instead of using that fancy import utility, the copy paste is a way around it for objects like the journal voucher. So you could use that too. Unfortunately, that's the only answer I've got for that particular question on can we kind of do the import with journal voucher. Essentially, no, you can't use that import utility, but you could have an Excel template that you run your journal vouchers in and then copy paste it into this grid. As long as the column sequence and the account codes match between the two interfaces, you're off and to the races, if that makes sense. And there's more areas in Business One that support that copy paste, by the way. SAP has been expanding that copy paste functionality. Like, for instance, you can copy and paste directly into a sales order. You know, say maybe a quote that was done outside the system in Excel. Okay. Hope that answered the question. It's probably the only way that we can answer it for a journal voucher, unless sometimes the smart consultants that are sitting on the webinar have a better idea.
I don't see any other questions. Did we want to give it a couple of minutes to see if anyone else has anything?
Yeah, you know, certainly we can. We don't usually wait too terribly long, but in the post webinar survey, people are more than welcome to answer additional questions, and we always make a point of getting back to them. So.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you, Rob, for a great presentation, and thank you to everyone for attending today. You will receive a follow-up email tomorrow with a link to the recording to our website. So feel free to share with anyone on your team that you think might benefit. When the session ends, you'll see a short survey display in your window. If you could take a few minutes to fill that in and let us know how we did and what you'd like to see in future webinars, we would really appreciate that feedback. Thanks again for attending, and we hope to see you at next month's webinar.